Hello, welcome to the Digital Nomad Experts podcast brought to you by Commute. I've got Marissa here, and today I've got a special guest. Her name is Natalie. I am really excited about this podcast episode for you guys. It's been a while in the making. Natalie and I connected a while ago, and actually our mutual friend Lisa, who is a fellow nomad, fellow traveler, was the one who made this introduction. So many of you ask us, if you can travel anywhere in the world as a nomad, when we are free to be wherever. We get a lot of people who write in, or even just when I meet people who have never heard of a nomad or learn what a digital nomad is, and they say, you can go anywhere. How do you choose where to go? Where do you go at any given time? How are you choosing your location? Where do you decide where to go next? And Jeff and I have talked on this podcast a lot about ways that we choose. But today, Natalie is going to talk to us about something called Astrocartography. And I did Google a quick, just for me, I was like, what is the definition of this? So Natalie, correct me if I'm wrong in this, and then we'll jump into who you are and your story, your nomad story, all of that before we jump straight into all the astrocartography. But what Google is telling me is it's also known as locational astrology, a travel-based branch of astrology that compares a person's birth chart, apparently can't speak today, to a map of the world to determine where you might have the most positive experiences, whether you're living somewhere, traveling somewhere. So to me, it's kind of I'm not people know from the podcast, I'm into all the woo spiritual things. Astrology has never been something I've been super deep into though at all. So I'm excited just to have this other point of view of somewhere we could potentially just a tool to use of hey, you might have a really good or a really bad experience in some of these locations. So one, if you could introduce yourself and also let us know if that's an accurate description.
Oh, absolutely. And that honestly was, I think you did an amazing job of explaining astrocartography. Yes, thank you, Google. Yeah, because basically astro means relating to the stars, celestial objects, or outer space. Yeah. And cartography is chart writing or map making. And yes, a quick little background about me. My name is Natalie Thomas. I'm the founder of The Now with Nat. I'm a yoga and meditation teacher, corporate mindfulness coach. I do a lot of one-on-one consulting as well with individuals and also with companies. And of course, I read astrocartography charts, which has been such a fun offer of mine, just because for me personally, astrology has been this amazing journey. And I have been a digital nomad for about 7 years now, and it has been extremely fascinating to see how astrocartography has played a role in my travels.
Yeah, I love that. So I'm excited to hear how it's played a role in yours, and you pulled up some information for mine, which I know nothing about yet, so maybe we'll get into that as well. But before we do, the majority of our listeners here are maybe someone who isn't yet living as a digital nomad, wants to become a digital nomad. So I love when we talk to new people is to share, what is your journey? What were you doing before you became a digital nomad? What was your life like? What were you working? Were you in an office? Give us a quick kind of synopsis of into transitioning into digital nomad life.
Sure, that's a really great question. So my background is actually in the film industry.
Ooh.
I did go to University of Georgia when I was younger. I went for sports. And honestly, through sports, when I was really young, I was a diver. That was my first introduction to mindfulness and my first really introduction into the power of the mind, right? Because as an athlete, I had to train my mind how to dive. And after I graduated from the University of Georgia, I stayed in Atlanta and I worked in the film industry for about 3 years. It was during this time that I went through, I guess, this big shift within myself. We can call it spiritual, metaphysical, whatever we want to call it, personal growth.
Yes.
And I went through this huge shift. And I was living in Atlanta. It was 2012. I mean, there was no term of digital nomad that I knew of at that time.
No.
And I remember I got so excited about all these concepts, and I started going deep into meditation and deep into yoga and astrology. And people are kind of like, what are you doing? This is really weird. You know, and I guess it kind of was. Yeah. So
you're ahead of your time.
It was a really interesting space to navigate just because there wasn't social media. No one was really talking about this. There was 2 people I can maybe talk to about this who didn't think I was going crazy.
Yeah.
And I remember 2013 hit and I had been practicing meditation yoga all of manifestation for about a year now. It was in my mid-20s, and I wanted to, and I worked in the film industry during this shift, and I knew that I wanted to go out to LA. So through, I don't even know, I guess like some hope and luck, I like packed up my car with no job. And when I was 26, I went out to Los Angeles. I had no job. I did have a place to stay though. So I wound up getting my apartment, and I was there, and I'm like, what am I going to do? And 2 days after I landed in LA, I started working for a movie studio, and I worked for 20th Century Fox making movie trailers, and I was there for 4 years. So I had this corporate job, but I felt living in LA at the time because I lived there 2013 to 2017, and that was around the time in between when the wellness industry and yoga started to really boom. And I felt more at home there, and I honestly never thought I was going to leave California. I was like, I'm never leaving LA.
I
found my
it's
home.
Sunny, it's beautiful, 330 days of the year.
100%. I was like, this is it. This is my home. I'm super happy. Wrong. And I don't know, I'm sure you've heard of a Saturn return, or for people listening, it's an astrology concept. So between the age of around 27 to 30, you go through a lot of different life changes. And by the time you get out of your Saturn return, which is really your Saturn birthday, your life drastically changes. So I literally moved to LA, beginning of my Saturn return. I was 26, about to turn 27. After I turned 30, boom, universe took me out. So basically what happened was I convinced my work in 2017 to let me go backpacking through South America. A good friend of mine, she had just quit her job. She was backpacking for 6 months, and she's like, please come meet me. Something in my soul was like, Natalie, you have to go on this trip.
Yeah.
I don't know what this calling was there. And again,
I
at this time,
all from my body.
Yeah, right.
All my legs, my arms.
I know. And I had never heard of the term a digital nomad. Like that was not even a thing.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, I'll go backpacking. So we went backpacking, the best time of my life. And I was there, and I was just
off of this time, or you were working remotely then?
Good question. I took work off because again, like I don't even think working remotely was an option. So I used all my vacation time, and I took 2 weeks leave of absence to do it. And I was like praying, asking the universe. I was like, what is next for me? Like I'm turning 30. I was interviewing actually at different movie studios. Nothing was really sticking. I didn't want to do production anymore. And a friend of mine who lived in Santiago, Chile called me. We were talking because I was in South America. And she's like, hey, like my good friend is looking for a roommate who speaks English because he wants to improve his English. Why don't you come here for a little bit? You can check out Santiago and you don't have to pay rent. And I just was like, okay, this is interesting. And at first, you know, like when you think about it, I'm like, no, that's crazy. Like, no. But the more I sat with it, I was like, I'm 30 years old. I loved South America so much. I'm never going to have this opportunity again in my life.
Yeah.
You know, I had no mortgage. I had no kids. So I flew back to the US. I put in my 1 month notice, and I completely quit my job. Now, again, I didn't even know what a digital nomad was. Yeah. I just blindly, not that I like recommend that maybe to everyone, but like
a lot of blissful ignorance. There used to be. Now there's so much more information about it.
Yeah.
But I went in with a very similar, just like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going.
No, and it was actually, looking back, I was like, wow, because she put me in touch with, you know, my roommate, and we actually became very good friends. It was an amazing experience. But I emailed him and I'm like, hey, can I move in with you in a month? And he goes, sure. And like, that was the end of our conversation.
I didn't get to know him, see if you'd like him.
No. I don't think there was like Zoom was just starting.
Yeah,
so I didn't have
like long distance calling was hard.
Nothing. I had no pictures. I didn't even know what the place looked like until I showed up. Like,
wow.
Looking back at that, full trust. I mean, I wouldn't even do that now. So yeah, it was just like a very spontaneous, I just have to do this. And I quit my job and moved to Chile. And that's how it happened.
Amazing. It's so funny. We kind of went over some of this the first time you and I chatted as well, but we have so many of the same similarities so you went to school in Georgia and then moved to Atlanta. So I'm from Atlanta. That's my home base. I also lived in LA the same years that you did. You might have been there a year longer than me. But I was there, I think, 2014 to 2016. Also, like, right around that Saturn return, like, ended engagement, left my corporate job. That was when I learned about Digital Nomad, like, left to travel. So, weirdly, both our timelines and locations, that's, like, gives me goosebumps as well, are, like, very, very similar, which is kind of wild. And then we went on the digital nomad journey like right around the same time, same age. So it's kind of crazy. So keep the story going. This is fascinating. So you end up in Chile. You had quit your job. Did you have anything lined up of how you were going to make income or like what was next? And then how did that play out?
So luckily, my friend who originally invited me, and she was my neighbor in LA, and she got into the Startup Chile program. Okay. So she had a startup at the time, and I basically came on board with her to just help her with her startup. Cool. And I actually started teaching yoga at a yoga studio in Santiago. I got my first yoga teacher training when I was in LA while I was doing my corporate job. Yeah. Later went on to get 2 more teacher trainings, but my first one was in Los Angeles. So I was able to teach yoga at a yoga studio in Santiago.
Cool. Amazing. So how long did you stay working for her, or did you switch to something like soon after? And then when did you start traveling more of like the typical kind of digital nomad that we think of moving around? But there's no right or wrong of how to nomad. But I know you also did kind of bop around the world for a while as well.
I did. So when I lived in Chile, I was there for about a year. Okay. And I just thought it was my home. Like, again, like I was like, oh,
here I am.
I love Santiago. I'm just going to stay and make this my life.
I love that. That was always your thought each time.
Each time.
Joke's on you.
Universe is like, not at all. Don't get too cozy. So basically what happened, I was at the startup and I had started working there. I'm trying to think of the exact dates, like maybe July 2017, like a few weeks after I arrived. Yeah. Around maybe February of 2018 or February, March, the startup, the program was over and there was no more funding.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh my gosh, like what am I going to do? Like, I have no idea. And I was in a Facebook group at the time. I think it was called Girls Travel or Girls Love to Travel. Some female travel group. Yeah. And there was a posting on there. We are looking for a blogger for a work exchange yoga teacher training in Bali. And while I was in Santiago, actually, I'll kind of go back to when I was in LA a year before I left, I randomly created a website called The Now with Nat. Don't know why. I had no idea what I was going to put on it. I just was like, I feel like I need a website. Wow. Again. Yeah. Don't know why. So when I was in Chile, I was like, oh, I'm just going to start blogging about my travel experiences and the fact that I teach yoga. So when I saw that job posting,
like created for you.
Yeah, I just sent them my website and then I got a call and they were like, okay, you're coming to Bali next week.
Amazing.
And I had no plans to go to Bali at all, like ever. I'm so glad I did. So what happened was I think it was April, I got the job, April 2018. And then I left for my yoga teacher training work. So I did a work exchange. Yeah. So I got my yoga teacher training at the same time. And when I was there, I intuitively felt like, I feel like I have to live in Bali because at that point, I wanted to work more in wellness. I wanted to continue the yoga and to also do retreats. Yeah. Which was a hard realization. And it was actually pretty crazy because I flew from Chile to Atlanta, Japan, and Japan, Bali. And then I flew all the way back and then packed up my stuff and a month later moved to Bali.
We were in Bali at the same time as well, too. And
we were?
This is like my first.
No
also,
way.
No, I'm like goosebumps. You can see like all over my body. Also in 2018. I guess I got there around like October 2018.
No way. And how long were you in Bali for?
I was only there for, I think, 6 weeks that time or so, and then kind of was like all around Southeast Asia. But that was like one of my first kind of like bigger, that was one of my first more longer term, like when I really, really started nomading. So kind of 2 years before I was bouncing around. But yeah, same time. We both landed, like called to Bali for different reasons, but like our whole timeline is exactly the same. This is wild.
Gosh, that's wild. I guess for like everyone listening, we really
had no idea.
Now.
I was like, I kind of know we were like in the same places at some point, but I had no idea. It's like we've literally followed the same path, same time, same ages. This is kind of crazy.
Because I lived there until end of 2019. Oh, wow. So I was there about a year and a half in Bali.
Yeah. And were you living in Canggu?
I started off in Ubud, and that's where the yoga teacher training was. And when I arrived to Bali, I didn't even know Canggu existed. Yeah. I just knew there was Ubud. Yeah. So I wound up staying in Ubud. I lived there. And when I moved to Bali, I wound up getting a job with Outsite. And for those who are not familiar with Outsite, I'm actually at an Outsite right now. I'm in Sagres, Portugal. they have different co-living, co-working spaces all over the world. And I got the job as the Bali outside community manager in Canggu. So I was living in Ubud. I was commuting to Canggu. And then eventually I did move to Canggu.
That's so funny. Okay, so then you were blogging and then you did the community management for Outsite. And then so if you could give us kind of what does the high level view look like of your next years of kind of as you moved around, or how long did you keep working there?
Yeah, so I was the community manager basically the whole time I was in Bali, which was such a blessing. I absolutely loved working with Outsite, and I have met so many amazing people. And our partnership even continued during COVID and even now. So it's been such a wonderful experience working with Outsite. And I think I had two other jobs, because at this time
it's whatever comes your way.
I wanted to make, it was crazy. So I was doing retreats. So I hosted my first wellness yoga retreat in Chiang Mai, Thailand in 2019. And then I hosted another retreat in Majorca, Spain in 2019 as well. So I was really working on the retreat aspect of things.
Right.
And I was also working part-time for a company in Singapore, and I was producing all of their Facebook live shows. Cool. It was an augmented reality company. It was really awesome. The founder, she was in tech, and she was originally from the US, and she was working in Singapore. And that was kind of fun because my background's in film.
Right.
And it's not totally in film, but it was still a chance to be creative and to help produce a show.
Yeah. Cool.
That had to do with technology and augmented reality.
Yeah.
So that's what I was doing at the time until I left Bali 2019. And that's where things really shifted for me in 2020.
Okay. Yeah. So take us through that journey. And real quick before you do, for anyone listening Outsite, a lot of people ask us if you're just getting started, maybe you don't know any other nomads or travelers, there's lots of different communities you can join. But Outsite is as Natalie says, kind of co-living. There's also co-working spaces usually. And it's a great place to kind of, it almost to me is almost like hotel-like sort of vibes, but really geared towards digital nomads and a place to land and have like-minded people around you to have events and dinners and do stuff with. So that's OUTSITE. And I've stayed at a bunch of those around the world as well. Highly recommend it. So I just wanted to throw that out. But yeah. Give us your version. So how did life shift and keep going 2020,
oh my gosh.
2020 onward?
Yeah, it was really crazy because I left December 2019. And at that time, that's where I kind of was more of that digital nomad. I had my home base in Bali, but you have to leave Bali every 2 months. So I got to travel around Southeast Asia a lot. I started leading retreats. End of 2019, I went back to the US for the holidays. And my sister, she was supposed to get married in May 2020. Mm-hmm. So for me, I was like, okay, well, that's a really long way to go back to Bali before the wedding. And her bachelorette party was in Miami, February. So I decided to move to Medellin, Colombia.
Okay.
And I moved to Medellin. And gosh, when did I move there? January 2020. And what happened 2 months later? We were in complete lockdown and we were in COVID. And it was during that time, and for people who don't know, Colombia was very, very locked down. We could not leave the house. And when we were allowed to leave the house, it had to be the last digit of our social card or your passport or your national ID. So that was once a week to go to the grocery store. And it was like that for 6 months. Mm-hmm.
6 months. Oh
and that's where I really started to shift my business because I couldn't do retreats anymore.
Yeah.
And I started to grow the Now with Nat to working with corporate teams. So I started to partner with corporate companies, and I started off just leading yoga classes, which was amazing. My first client was actually the company Upwork. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you know of Upwork because as a nomad, a lot of people use Upwork to find work. And luckily, I got in touch with Upwork, the company, and I started leading yoga classes.
Online?
I joined... all online, cool. All virtual, all during COVID, did it for 4.5 years with them.
Wow.
And started partnering with different corporate companies and corporate teams, implementing wellness and mindfulness programs, and still do that today as well.
Cool.
So that's how my business and my company really shifted. And then a year after COVID, I say 2021, is when I started to really go deep into astrocartography. So a little over 3 years ago was when I started astrocartography readings.
Amazing. Yeah. You're such a good example. I think, if I think back to myself when I graduated college, it was like you get a job and you work at one company and you do that for 20 years, or maybe move around every couple of years, but you do the thing. But I feel like you were like, leap and the net will appear. And it's really like, for anyone listening, I just want to say, everyone has different style of what you're comfortable with and the risks you're willing to take. But I feel like you're such a great example of really just following your intuition of like, I need to be here. I want to move there. And like the jobs, the opportunities, like what you've learned about yourself and kind of made into careers along the way really just kind of keeps appearing and evolving as you evolve. And it's a really scary thing, I think, for a lot of people, but it's always just so helpful to hear real examples of like all the different kind of careers and jobs and income and ways that you've made it work along the way as a nomad. And like, there's always a way. So it's really awesome to hear.
Yeah, there really always is. And when I started this journey, I thought I was moving to Santiago, Chile for 2 or 3 months and then going right back to my job.
Right.
And even my corporate job, when I left, I met with HR and they're like, here's our number. When you're back, let us know.
Yeah.
And the weird part was when I did decide to leave 20th Century Fox, they got bought out by Disney 2 months later.
Wow.
And everyone lost their jobs anyway. So that's why I always say, like, follow that gut feeling and keep following the signs. And sometimes we are meant to do multiple things, because I have learned so much from working with different companies and doing different projects that I have been able to take those learnings and kind of weave it into my own business as well.
I love that. I always say, I do a lot of career coaching, I always say, like, a lot of people worry about, well, I'm starting over. I'm doing something totally new. And I always say, there's a quote that you're starting from experience, not from scratch. So even if it feels like something's not connected, like I love you said the job that you got for the company in Singapore, like you used your movie experience mixed with things, your editing. So it's like you never know what will, I don't know, what you'll take away from things, even if they seem totally unconnected.
For sure. And I'm totally rebirthing all the time. Like it's a total change. And I'm always starting over in a sense, but starting from a place of, maybe starting a little bit lower, moving up, then starting again into something else, and then starting again and keep moving up. But I'm always starting over, rebirthing and changing and shifting. And I think that's the beauty of this, is we don't have to have that linear job for 30 years anymore.
I think, I guess in my experience, people who have lived the digital nomad life are far more open to that. I feel like when I think about society back home, it's like a much scarier thing. I think a lot of people base their identities around their work and their career and what they've done. And, in the US, we always say, like, when you say, what do? You say, like, I am a film editor. I am a accountant. Instead of when you travel, it's like people say, like, oh, this is what I do. It's not who you are. And so I think there's a lot more freedom to kind of say, oh, I want to explore this. I want to try that. I'm going to transition to this. And it's not, like, it gets easier and easier. But for me, I know, like, the first time I did that was terrifying. But
oh, and I totally agree with that. And also what makes it easier living this lifestyle, or even like just even being an outside, is you're with like-minded people who are all doing similar things. Yeah. So you don't feel as much as an outsider.
Ooh, yeah.
And I think the most wild part, though, about this, like this weird juxtaposition, is when I was working at my corporate job, 20th Century Fox, I loved it. I love working in film, and I actually still do work in the film industry a bit.
Yeah.
And that's actually an industry I will always be in. But at the end, I wasn't feeling fulfilled anymore in my job. I didn't want to be in post-production. I was just showing up.
Yeah.
Now that I've been doing different things, now that I have my own business, I have to show up even more because I love to work. Like, working for me is just, it's always a huge passion of mine.
Yeah.
So I think that's also like something, when we shift the lens or we shift our thinking of, oh, digital nomad, just people are just kind of off traveling.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it too is I meet the most passionate people who are so into their work and into what they're doing, but also they learn, through travel and through experiences that can help them grow as well, which essentially if you grow as a person, that's going to be a great thing for your company too.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. I love what you said, just being surrounded by those like-minded people. It makes all the difference in the world just to not feel so crazy. It's like, I remember when I first landed in Bali, everyone was living, it's like a little land of digital nomads and people who were starting different things and trying different things. And it was the first place I landed where I felt like I don't really have to explain who I am and what I'm doing. Like, everyone here is doing that, so they get it just as a baseline. And I just felt less crazy. I don't know. So that was really
For
helpful.
sure. And even in these digital nomad communities,
Yeah.
I found that sometimes I feel like I'm still in school because there's so many meetups in groups. Like I can go learn some. There's like another meetup about artificial intelligence. There's a meetup about investing. There's a meetup about marketing. So people are creating these work experiences even in the digital nomad scene. So you can keep learning and you can keep growing. You can join co-works. You can go to different talks, which has been really awesome being a digital nomad too.
Yeah, I agree. So I want to keep hearing the story now of, so we've kind of got your Chile to Bali to Medellin lockdown. Talk to me about, so you mentioned at the beginning of the call of like, now that you understand astrocartography, like as you look back at some of your nomad locations, other places you've traveled to. So I'd love a mix of, can you share some of the places just as a nomad? Because I think it's really inspiring to hear like all places in the world you can go, where have you lived, even if it's for like a couple weeks, a months, whatever that looks like. And
Absolutely.
Then layering kind of what you know about astrocartography. How was that, like as you see that now, how did that impact, for better or worse, some of the places that you chose and visited along the way?
No, that's a really, really good question because I became a digital nomad before I started reading astrocartography charts. I had known about astrocartography and I had looked at my chart, but it wasn't until I really started to study my astrocartography chart.
Yeah.
And even aside from astrocartography, it's also studying your natal chart, looking at your ninth house placements, which has to do with travel, looking at your fourth house placements, which has to do with home and your environment. So what was really fascinating to me is I'm trying to give you guys just like a few examples of like the top places.
Yeah.
As a digital nomad, my first spot was Santiago, Chile. Now, I have my north node line in the IC running right through Santiago, and it's also running through Medellin. Now, whenever we go to a north node line is your life path. It puts you on a brand new path in your life. So when we think of our south node, like our south node in our chart is the energy we've really experienced.
Okay.
So for me, my south node is in Libra. Many lifetimes I've done Libra. I know Libra energy. My moon's in Libra. It's a very comfortable energy for me. And my north node is in Aries in this lifetime, which is very independent. It's like leading the way, creating my own business. So regardless of what your north and south node is, your north node is what you're stepping into in this lifetime. So I'm stepping into Aries energy. So whenever you go to a north node line, it's feelings of deja vu. It's karmic lessons, karmic experiences. It's feelings of familiarity. It really propels you onto this completely new life path in your life when you go to a nodal line. So, and it was also in my IC. So every line has a different angle, AC, DC, MC, or IC. IC has to do with home. So for me, when I was in Santiago, I felt like I was at home.
Yeah.
I had amazing relationships. I had a great group of friends. It really felt like I had arrived home. I really felt like I can truly be myself.
Cool.
So that was just wild to see. And then that same line was going right through Medellin. And what happened, I was completely on lockdown. I changed everything. I was living with my partner at the time. Yeah, it was just so life-changing.
Yeah.
And I think nodal lines can be really interesting to go to and to live on. So that was a cool connection. And when I'm in Portugal, I'm actually living near 3 lines. As a reader, I normally say to go to 1 or 2 lines or the energy is a lot. But in Portugal, I live near my Chiron line in the IC. I live on my Uranus line in the MC and my Jupiter line in the AC. And just like a very quick overview of what that means is Chiron it's called the wounded healer or the wounded warrior. And it's in my IC, again, my home. So it was me coming here, recreating this new home for myself. A lot of people tend to go to Chiron lines after breakups as well. And I did go through a breakup. And also on Chiron lines, they show us what we need to work on. They're not easy. You have to like look at your wounds and be like, wow, I need to heal from this. But you find redemption and rejuvenation.
Right. And by the way, if you're listening to Natalie and you're like, I don't know what these lines mean, I don't know what these words mean, I don't know what these letters mean.
I know it's a lot.
I don't either. So I just want you to say, but you're explaining it really well. I just want anyone who's listening to be like, I don't know this. I don't usually follow this. I don't either, but I think it's really fascinating. And if you're listening to this, again, I love all the woo manifestation. I love all the things, but I've never really been super big. I don't know why. Astrology just never sticks with me, but I think it's really fascinating. So again, if you're curious, I think if you're into astrology, you're going to be like all in, you're already all in. If you're like, I don't know about this, what I would offer to you what I love about this is like, I like to take this as just information of why not? Like, what if this is something to follow? Why not? Maybe it gives me inspiration for a place I want to go or don't want to go, or explain some things in the past. So I think about it as like, I don't know, what if this is true? It's kind of how I like to think about all of this and just follow along. So anyway, yeah, it makes tons of sense what you're saying about these lines. And you're living in Portugal kind of full-time-ish right now, correct?
I am. I do have my visa. And I would even say it's so funny because in a lot of these places I lived, I actually did not base it off of my astrocartography.
Just kind of ended up there. It was
just a complete,
anyway. Yeah.
It was a complete, I don't know, we can say coincidence, serendipitous moment that I have just traveled and lived on these lines.
Yeah.
To learn and grow and experience different energies in a certain way. And honestly, it's the same when I do readings for people. They usually have a gut instinct about something and then they have a line going through. Or they've been somewhere and there's a line going through.
Right.
So I also believe that we are guided and called to different places based off of what we need to experience at that time.
Yeah. So do you, knowing like everything you know about astrocartography now in your own chart, do you travel intentionally to places that you want to experience certain lines? Or is it more of an understanding of like, oh, when I was in these places, now this makes sense from your path?
You know, I usually travel based off more of my gut instinct, which I tell people to do.
Yeah.
In every place has a certain energy and a certain resonance. But I do always look up the lines when I am going to a place.
Yeah.
So I do know what to expect. And a lot of times I am called to places based on opportunities.
Yeah.
And it's through those opportunities where I look and I'm like, oh, wow, okay, there's this line going through. Like I had an opportunity to go live in El Salvador beginning of the year for 3 months. It's close to my Uranus line. And that's expect the unexpected. It's change, spontaneity, surprises. And that's the exact experience I did have in El Salvador.
Interesting. Yeah, it's so fun to think about that. And I always say something I just didn't really anticipate before I started living as a digital nomad is how much each place has like an energy that I either get there and I'm like, I just love it here. I couldn't tell you why. Or I land somewhere and I'm like, oh, I don't like it here. I want to get out of here.
Totally.
Or anywhere in between. Some places feel very neutral to me. And what's so funny is I guess I just assumed everyone felt the same way before I started traveling. And now that I have so many nomad friends, it's like some of my favorite places they hate and some of their favorite places I'm like, I never want to go there. And we feel very energetically, it's something that's kind of very intangible that I've never really been able to explain. And I think a lot of astrocartography potentially could explain like why we just energetically feel different in different lands and different places on the globe.
Oh, absolutely. And I always say not everyone is going to enjoy the same energy, the same place, the same experience, because we are all vibrating at a certain frequency.
Yeah.
And that can even be why we go to places that we really resonate with. And then maybe a year or two later, we don't resonate the same anymore. And that's just what happens.
We've changed.
Yeah, I never thought I was going to leave LA, and I still love LA. I still have to do some work sometimes in LA, but I go back there and it doesn't feel the same energetically to me anymore.
Yeah.
But I did have a more challenging line going through LA.
Right.
But we do shift and we change and our frequency changes and we begin to become called to certain places and it's always the perfect time that we get there.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Of like, I lived in New York for a lot of years and like in the city, and I was back there at like earlier this year, and I was like, I hate it. Like I don't like it there anymore, but I loved like during the years that I lived there, I loved, and also just energetically. Yeah, there's some places I go back to and I'm like, it's not the same as I was, but I also like you said, just kind of travel intuitively of wherever calls to me, where a friend invites me to, where I don't know, for whatever reason, it's like, I don't know why, but I'm meant to go here and I go, and it sounds like that's sort of how you travel as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I still always check my chart. Trust me, I check everyone's chart all the time. I'm always reading it. I'm always seeing what's going on. And I've been pretty lucky with some of my lines. But you know, if there is a Saturn line going through anywhere, which it can be more challenging, it also depends on the placements of your chart.
Right.
I do know what to expect at least.
Amazing. So can you give an example? So if someone was going to come to you for a reading, so I know you've pulled up my chart that you have looked at. If you want to give, I don't know, the best way, like a couple of examples or just kind of some of the time. I know you know, in a full reading, you would probably go way deeper on a lot of stuff, but just so someone could understand, like, if this was a reading they wanted to do or something they wanted to learn or understand, Just like a couple examples, like where would you start? Like give like just a little bit of information.
So for a reading, I always start by looking at somebody's natal chart.
Okay.
And which is really important because I'll preface by saying that I do work intuitively as well.
Yeah.
So I do see images, I get pictures, I get downloads, and sometimes work comes up and we start talking about work or even like relationship stuff. So I always like to tune in and kind of see what comes through. But off the bat, I look at everyone's top 3, sun, moon, and rising. And I look at your 4th house, I look at your north node, and I look at the 9th house. So basically with your 4th house, that's your family, your home environment, why you might move, why you might travel. Because some placements are a little bit more fixed. They're not going to move. It's going to be harder to make a move. And even for example, like your chart, you have in your 4th house, Taurus. Taurus is a fixed sign. It's an earth sign. So for you, it's really good to plan out where you're going. I mean, you are an Aquarius though, and that's where it gets very, very interesting because that Aquarius sun and I believe you have 2 placements in Aquarius with a lot of fire. So for you, you can like get up and be a little bit more impulsive, but in your home environment, because Taurus is ruled by Venus, it's better for you to have these experiences that are maybe more out in nature, that are more aesthetically pleasing, a little better to plan out your home and to have this really grounded, solid home environment, even though this Aquarius in you wants to get up and split time and move different places. So I think it's really important to look at someone's chart. And I also like to look at certain aspects within your chart, which is like a whole other conversation. And I also like to look at your north node because I think nodal lines are really important. They've been very life-changing for me. And your north node is the energy that you're stepping into in this lifetime. And it's interesting because in your chart, your north node's in Pisces. Pisces
What does that mean?
It's ruled by Neptune. It's one of the most spiritual signs of the zodiac. So, and it's kind of like breaking free from the rules of Virgo because your south node, what you've done is been very rule-oriented which is great, like having this structure, having this task, having routine, I guess that's the better word to say, but it's also breaking free from those routines and having a nice balance between the two and doing a lot of work in this lifetime that is more in the intuitive spiritual realms. So by sensing the energy of a person, I'm able to then look at an astrocartography chart a little bit different, more tailored to the individual. So after your natal chart, then we go ahead and we pull up your astrocartography chart, which is basically the map of the world. And when we pull up the map, there's all these crazy lines going through, as I'm sure people might see. You can go to astro.com and pull up your locational astrology. In every planet, there's a different angle. Every angle means something different. AC is your personality. This is so surface level. I'm just moving through it fast. DC is about relationships. MC is your work, career, public recognition. IC is more of your family and home. So I like to take a look at the astrocartography chart next. And sometimes in readings, people just want to see and learn about the lines, and that's great. And some people have very specific questions on where they can go.
Right.
So I look at the lines and I look at your harmonious and disharmonious aspects within your chart as well to help kind of pinpoint and also work intuitively of maybe where to relocate or travel to next.
Can you give an example? So as you look at mine, you talked about like the nodal line or any like harmonious or disharmonious, like and just like even just a broad look at it. Like what can you give some information about locations or homes or lines? Like what is something that you see just off the bat?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I am going to pull up your chart, and I'm actually just gonna, which I had already looked at and just taking a quick look at a few things. It's actually interesting because, oh, wow, this is kind of cool. I know. I'm like, oh, this is so fascinating. And here's the thing, too. When I pull up harmonious and disharmonious aspects, they're definitely important because it's nice to see how planets are aspected within your chart over different locations, if it's going to be in a more harmonious way or disharmonious way. But I also believe life happens wherever we go. Mm-hmm. And you know that there are going to be harmonious and disharmonious things that happen to us. I mean, I don't believe in a perfect place. Even when I lived in Santiago and I lived on my nodal line, which is a very life-changing line, I did have to go through lessons.
Yeah.
But on a very more surface level, conversation right now, just looking at your chart, you do have Jupiter in your AC very close by Lisbon.
Interesting.
And Jupiter is the planet that's known to be more good luck, good fortune. And it's very interesting because for you, Jupiter does sit in your 3rd house of neighbors and actually communication and how you communicate and use your voice. So it may be no coincidence that you're connecting with people who are from Lisbon to be on your podcast. And that can be something, if you go to Lisbon, you might connect with a lot of people there. It might give you abundance even for people on your podcast.
Yeah.
Because Jupiter is in your third house too, it could be, I mean, you could even write a book in this lifetime. And your communication is very, very important. So Jupiter does give us more of the good luck, abundance, good fortune. I would have to double check to see how it is aspected within your chart. Your Jupiter sits in the sign of Aries, which is this go-getter energy. Now, with Jupiter, it is known to be more good luck, good fortune. It sits in your AC, which is your ascendant. So it's all about you, your personality, how you view yourself, how you're growing. But sometimes we can be overindulgent on Jupiter at the same time. So we have to be mindful of I don't want to say the light and the dark aspects. I mean, I guess that's the best human way to put it. But naturally, Jupiter is more of a happy-go-lucky planet. And
Right.
for you, it is very close by Portugal.
Interesting. And is that the same as like the nodal lines that you mentioned, or that's something different?
So that's something different. So with nodal lines, and it's so funny that I went on a tangent about nodal. Let's see. You know what? You actually have your nodal line going very close by Los Angeles. And that's where you lived.
Yeah.
And that's where did you start your nomadic journey after LA?
Yeah.
Yeah. So normally on our nodal line, it puts us on a brand new path in our lives. And it puts you on this brand new journey, this brand new path. So your nodal in the IC is going through LA, but it's also crossing with your Mars in the AC. Now, Mars lines, they're more of malefic planets. Like that's a malefic planet like Saturn. But Mars, here's the light in the dark. Mars gives us good luck, abundance, that's Jupiter. Mars gives us drive and passion and action. And it's funny for you because I actually have my Mars line also going through LA, but my Mars sits in my fourth house. That's a whole other story. But Mars gives us this passion, this drive, but it can be intense. It's Aries energy. Like I think of like a movie director, a fitness instructor, like thriving on Mars. We can also be very active. However, like the flip side, it can be a little bit, have this underlining anger or aggression with it at the same time. But I would have to just double check too to see how it's aspected and to also see the placement that your Mars sits in.
Perfect. This is so fascinating. I feel like those are the main questions I have. And I just wanted you guys to be able to get a little bit of a feel. And again, I'm sure if you did a full session with Natalie, you would go so much more into detail about so many lines. And a lot of this is like, I don't even know. So if this calls to you, really, for me, one, Natalie has a fascinating story. We like to share all nomads' journeys because there's something I think you can take away from anyone's story. But I also just wanted to share that this was out there. So again, if you are listening to this and you are like, Jupiter, Mars, what are you talking about? I don't know. It's not for me. Take it or leave it. There's no pressure. But I wanted to share that this was out there and possible. Just if you're like, I want to understand where you've traveled or what you've done or where you might want to travel to or what these things mean. So I know for me, I was curious about astrocartography when I heard of it because I can feel energy in different places. I just like to, learn about different, travel in places and why we feel different things and have different experiences all over the world, especially as a nomad, but you can literally choose to be anywhere and have any experience. So if you are listening to this and you would like to do a reading with Nat or learn more from her, I will say when I first learned, I was like, I could figure this out myself. Like, let me Google it. I entered my information into, say, website you had said. It comes with all these crazy lines. And I was like, I don't know what the fuck this means. Like,
Yeah.
Even when it gives it to you, it is like, I could not decipher it for the life. You can kind of get maybe a little bit of information, but it's very confusing. And I think Natalie has, as you can hear, a lot of wisdom on this topic. And I know the person who recommended You and I Connect just had great readings with you and great things to say. So if this is something that calls to you, if you'd love to learn more or do a session, Natalie, where can people find you and like what are next steps if people are interested in this topic with you?
No, absolutely. So my website is thenowwithnat.com. And we can kind of even break it down into 3 tiers for learning astrocartography. There's a completely free option. I have a blog where you can go on and it kind of tells you how to read your chart. If you want to go more in depth, I do have an 80-page ebook and a company workbook, which I know I have a code to share with everybody. So I believe with the code, that would be like $22 for both. And I do also offer 50-minute astrocartography readings where we go deep onto your natal chart, the energies that you're working with, and we also look at your astrocartography map at the same time. And The code would be Beach Commute, and you are able to get a discount on both the reading and the ebook, and then or the blog, which is a free option as well.
Amazing. So check that out. We will link to that in the show notes as well. And Natalie, thank you for sharing your story, for sharing so much information about astrocartography and everything that comes with it. It is so far over my head in many ways, but that's why there are experts like you to identify the charts and understand them and fill us in on what they all mean. So again, this is, I think, a lot of the information in this podcast is so different than anything we have shared before. But I know Jeff and I just love to share, like, there's so much out there. So again, if this resonates, take it with you. If it doesn't, this isn't our usual topics. We don't always talk about different astrology and that sort of thing. But I think it's just fascinating to know that this does exist. And there's so much information. Like, I know a lot of people really do resonate once you start to hear and understand this stuff. So thank you so much for sharing your journey, for sharing all about this. And for anyone listening who's excited to learn more, again, check out the website. We'll link it here as well, and enter Beach Commute if you want a special discount to work with Nat.
Perfect. And thank you so much, Marissa, for having me on the show. And it's been such a fun conversation. And I want to thank you so much for your time.
That's good. We'll see you next week.